Morning. So my name's Cathal Loughnane. Almost. Like Loch Ness, but with an An. So I started out as an engineering student and then was a car designer for a while. And now I head up all the non-automotive projects and partnerships at Aston Martin Design. Today I just want to talk to you just a global sort of presentation of who we are and what we do. And a little bit about, why we stick our heads up out of the cars every now and then and have a look around at what everybody else is doing. So Aston Martin is a 108-year-old company, so founded in 1913. Started off initially making some production cars, but every weekend went for a little bit of a race, including up a quite famous hill in England called Aston Hill, which is where half of our name comes from. The other half, Martin, being one of our founders. 1947, we got a new executive chairman by the name of David Brown, whose initials DB some of you may recognize as being on, one of our most legendary race cars that Carroll Shelby and Roy Salvatore took to victory in Le Mans in 1959, but also graced some of the most beautiful cars ever made in the DB4 GT Zagato, and what is also quite possibly the world's most famous car, which sort of made its big debut in 1964 with Goldfinger, and is still as relevant for us today as it was back then, with No Time to Die in cinemas now for anybody looking for something to do this evening. It's quite good. Then just sort of a little bit of story about, how our brand positioning. We are a luxury brand. We will this year make our 100,000th car. So it's taken us 108 years to do what Toyota get done before breakfast. And that is something that we definitely see as a positive. So the V8 Vantage is 20,000 cars. But also, we're very focused on making the rare and the exclusive. So the 177 was, imaginatively, one of 77 hypercars. We also have another hypercar, the Vulcan, track only 24 examples. Our latest hypercar, the Valkyrie, is 150 units. So all hand-built, all very, very exclusive, all completely customized. Every single car out of the 150 will be in a different color and a different finish. We work very closely with our clients to customize every aspect of the car, which I know is something that's very common in architecture, but in the car industry, you can pick between 8 paint colors and that's it. For us, it's your initial option is about 70, 80 colors, and then an extra button, which is basically infinite. And we work, hand in hand with our clients to develop unique finishes, unique paints, unique colors to order. But still, very much not just luxury focused, but technology focused, and that really comes to the forefront through our racing teams. So this is our Vantage GTE, and this year we've recently moved back into the big show with our new Formula One team. But I think at the core of everything we do and the way we work really is craftsmanship. And for me, craftsmanship sort of expresses itself in multiple different levels. It is, it's integral to the process. It's something that, traditionally is really thought of as the leather work, the painters, the hand sculpting, the more, let's say, traditional processes. And this is still very much true. It takes us over 200 hours to assemble a single Aston Martin. An average production car will run somewhere between 10 to 6 hours. So far more time invested into the assembly of our cars. There are 2 robots in the factory. Tesla factory will have 2 robots every 6 feet. So this hand craftsmanship, the continuation and the advancement of all the traditional processes is something that we're very, very invested in. But we see the engineering and the technology and the beauty and the craftsmanship in a well-tuned, well-balanced, well-designed machine is something as well that, you know, is core to the way we work, and is also core to our brand. And I would even say that over the last decade, we're adding a whole new type of craftsmanship, you know, the digital craftsman, where we're no longer covering our interiors with 40, 50 knurled metal buttons, but replacing it with a touch screen and a team of graphic designers and HMI designers and coders and programmers who are expressing a completely different craft, but that's adding a new layer of modernity, a new layer of functionality, a new layer of performance to all of our products. In terms of design, this craftsmanship is really, you know, created, developed in our design studio, driven by 4 key philosophies. Obsession. Well, I mean, I'm sure some of you guys have worked with some famous designers. Obsession or diva, I'll let you pick the word. But yeah, we're, you know, quite an obsessed group, always pushing to the next technology, the next solution, the next design, the next product, the next experience. Everything about cars, especially in Aston Martin, is about proportion. How does it sit? How is it balanced? How does it look on the road? How does it feel when it's standing still? How is it dynamically? And, you know, how well does it interact with the world around it? Authenticity. I think this is very key. When we say we have a metal badge, it's a metal badge. It's not a piece of plastic that's chromed. You know, as a luxury brand, there always has to be truth to what we're doing and truth to what we're saying. And finally, formalism. What story are we telling? What emotion are we trying to evoke? How can a piece of metal and leather standing alone in a street with no advertising billboard, with no marketing person behind it, how can that piece of metal tell you a story and communicate a message to you? And how do we craft and design those shapes and forms to do that? And that's really born out of our studio and you know, a century's worth of processes. So everything that we do starts with a sketch. You know, we are, as you will see in a minute, hyper digitalized in this sort of modern world, but everything always starts with a sketch. It's where we find the vision of the car, the story of the car, the character of the car. And that's then something that we spend 3-4 years working with hundreds and hundreds of people and suppliers to not just to protect, but also to amplify and to reinforce. And we're always, up until the very, very last day, always looking back to the original sketch and making sure that the character is there, that the personality is there. After that, taking that 2-dimensional shape and turning it into a 3-dimensional object. And I think this is where our second layer of craftsmen come in after the designers themselves, using very, very traditional techniques. You know, we've been modeling cars with clay for about 70 years. Before that, it was the same process in wood. Before that, it was the same process in marble, although not really cars at the time. But still, you know, a lot of people or a lot of companies refer to this team as modelers, but you know, we were even in the studio yesterday talking about what we do, and for us, they're really sculptors. It's taking that sketch and interpreting it as a feasible, realistic 3D form. Because God knows sometimes us as designers, we do cheat a little bit on the sketch. The wheels might be slightly too big on every car sketch you've ever seen. But then we're moving everything into the digital process. And I think one thing that's key to say about the digital process, relatively new, say about 25 years. But it is the reference point for all communications and collaboration for us. Everything we do with engineering is the digital model. Everything we do with suppliers is the digital model. We no longer have to bring in hundreds and hundreds of people through the studio to look at the clay model, to measure it. These digital tools have meant that the average design time for a production car within the industry has gone from 6 years to 4.5 years. For us, it's gone from 4 years to 3 years because it just makes everything faster, more fluid. We can instantaneously see where is our surface relative to an engine, where is the suspension poking out, what are the legal angles we have to respect on the headlights, and does everything work? It's also something that's, starting relatively recently to bleed out into the customer-facing side of the business, where we've got the online configurators where you can change all the colors, all the materials, the lighting in real time. You can turn the model around. A lot of that being recently, re-energized by the power of modern graphics cards, but also game engines. So, some of our customer-facing product are moving away from the very, very high-level software to just, game engines. We are starting to use some VR, although mostly for just rough checks. I think one of the key learnings that we really have is that no matter what technology it is, you can have the best software in the world, the best screens in the world, headsets, hollow spaces, power walls, and within the car industry, we've bought every single toy you can buy. No two-dimensional surface can accurately represent a three-dimensional object the same way as a physical model. So we always work in 3D, we always check everything in 3D, but the clay is king. For us, the physical model will never be replaced because it's just not how the human eye works or the human brain works. And even with the best technology, it does help us accelerate. It does help us to make less models. It does help us to remove certain steps, but there will always, always be the physical model at the end of the day, because that's the closest representation to the actual thing that we're going to be shipping out of the factory at the end of all of the process. And one sort of key thing about the digital and the physical is it's not one or the other. It's both in parallel. The digital modeler and the physical modeler are constantly working. It's not I'll do my job and then you'll do your job. The teams sit in the same room. They're working hand in hand every day, and there is always a model on a milling machine going from the digital world to the physical world, and another model on a scanner going from the physical world into the digital world, and they're constantly bouncing and feeding off each other. And I think this is a key element in how it helps us create, more beautiful cars and better cars, is the fact that we're constantly changing perspective. You're looking at it from a digital point of view, you're looking at it from a physical point of view, you're looking at it from a stylistic point of view, you're looking at it from a feasibility point of view. And as you bounce from one to the other, you'll see something on the CAD that you didn't see on the model, you'll see something on the model that you didn't see on the CAD. And that sort of switching of perspective really helps us improve, progress, and refine. But even with all of this, we still invest a lot of time in protecting the traditional. We still have Nigel, who sits in the middle of our studio, actually right between the clay modelers and the CAD modelers, right next to the designers, who develops all the leather work by hand, who crafts all the prototypes and does all the innovation for all of our saddlery, as was Nigel's Nigel's pretty old, let's say Nigel's grandfather, back in 1913, because technology for us, the new tools are not replacements, they're complements. We just have a bigger toolbox. We don't have a modern toolbox. We don't take out a traditional technique because we've found a modern one. And this really gives us the power at any moment during the day to really decide what is the best tool for what I'm doing. Is it a massive server farm running Maya and 74,000 licenses of some render engine? Or is it a bloke with a scissors and a needle and thread? Our sort of ever-growing toolbox is just that, growing, and we never throw out a tool. Sometimes we might use them a little bit less, but they're always there, they're always being maintained, and they're always ready to go at a moment's notice. And finally, colors and trim, sort of the last phase. Again, something that's very, I would say, manual. Hundreds of samples, thousands of samples, leathers, paints, carbon fiber, but also a department that has seen really a huge revolution in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. Well, I'm going to thank NVIDIA for this one. Graphics cards that can take an entire car, which is slightly heavily modeled, there's a couple of surfaces in there, and render them in real time and allow us in real time with real-time ray tracing to add a stripe, change it from red to green. What does it look like in carbon? What if the carbon was matte? Can we have it in black? Of course you can. What if it's gold-plated? No problem, shake, of course. And has allowed us to really accelerate, to explore more, to explore faster, and also to show our clients in real time what the car can look like. And has also really, I would say, revolutionized at the very high end the way we interact with the clients, in that they can become the co-designer of their own car. We always sort of accompany them a little bit, because if you let them on their own, they'll just go way too crazy. But the fact that we can change the visualization in real time, the fact that someone can go, well, what if it was blue? It's blue. Really does open up new possibilities, not just for us, but also for all of our clients. Now switching off to away from the cars to what we call our brand extension or partnerships. And in some ways, this is kind of the same reasoning as what I was saying about the switch between the digital and the physical, the clay and the computer, in that it's about changing perspective. We every day are looking at what does our story look like in metal? What does our brand feel like in the shape of a car? But working on these projects allows us to express that in a different shape, in a different form, and find new ways of telling the Aston Martin story, whether it is on land, on sea, on air. What happens when we take our surface language that we're used to looking at on an object that's 4 meters long and take it down to something that's 1.5 meters? How does it balance with an object where half of the technicals are visible instead of being closed? And that change of perspective and that new canvas allows us to find new design cues, new ways of interpreting our story, new ways of expressing all the craftsmanship, but also allows us to work hand in hand with people who are the best in their business. We get a lot from coming out to meet people. We get a lot from sitting down and having lunch and having a chat and visiting other companies or other worlds. But when you actually spend 2 or 3 years designing, developing, and selling a product all the way to the end, it's something that really we learn a lot from. We teach, we bring all of our 108 years of experience, to our partners, but on every project, we learn something. For example, Brough are based in Toulouse, in the south of France. First thing you learn is it's really nice to live somewhere where you can eat outside in December. But their entire supply chain is shared with the aerospace industry. So these are not the guys that make carbon fiber for rally cars or race cars that we're used to using. These are the guys that make carbon fiber for helicopters and the fairings for satellite launch vehicles. They mill all of their screws from titanium, same people that make Airbuses. And just that allows us to see new ways of using materials that we've been using for 40, 50, 60 years. It allows us to meet new suppliers. It allows us to see things that we think we knew off by heart in a different through a different lens and in a different way. We brought a lot of luxury to our Airbus helicopter, but they also taught us a lot about how to make things light. And, a light sports car is always a good thing. And then switching to residences. So this is our first residential project, 66-story tower in Miami, 390 units. We decided to start small. So again, another really interesting way of exploring the brand, of exploring the language. And well, what if it isn't 4 meters long? What if it's 40 stories high? What if it's not in metal? What if it's in concrete? How do we take a design language that was developed over one of the most sculptural and sensual forms and apply it in a world that has flat surfaces and 90-degree angles? Can we still find the Aston Martin spirit? Can we still find the Aston Martin luxury? Are our materials still valid? Is our story still valid? Then another project that we're doing with Sir David Adjaye in 130 William in New York. What does it look like when you're in an Aston Martin with the most amazing views in the world? Sometimes that means the Scottish Highlands, or a road in the Alps, and sometimes it means the 60th floor in New York with a view of the Brooklyn Bridge and Central Park. But still all developed and designed in the same place with the same people. We don't separate our automotive and our non-automotive teams. They sit in the same room. They work with the same tools. They share the same samples. So when we're looking at the samples for an architecture project, it's on the same table, stored on the same shelves as our hundreds of thousands of automotive samples. And that one allows us to really amplify what we do in real estate by taking advantage of that 108 years of knowledge and of experience, but also allows us to feed back. The samples, let me take that example of the tile, a texture we would never have seen from an automotive supplier, a finish we would never have seen in a competitor's car, but something that, coming from the architectural industry, coming from an architectural supplier, and is sitting there and is directly, not just directly accessible, but is directly a source of inspiration for our car design teams. We recently did our first private home in upstate New York, in Rhinebeck. And this gives us an opportunity as well to sort of weave multiple stories, to connect all of our different sort of departments or products together. So we can have this amazing luxury home where you walk in and you've got what we call an automotive gallery with your, in this case, DB5 or your Vantage or your DBS sitting behind your wine rack. And it allows us to tell our story in a different way, but it also allows us to create things that, let's say, not just protect, but also show off and visualize our cars in the best light possible. Also, there's a treehouse, which I find very, very cool. It's oddly my favorite part of the project. And then our architecture teams also design all of our retail spaces. So working on houses, working on homes, working on apartments, collaborating with some of the best architects in the world on some of the most interesting projects in the most interesting places really does sort of feed us and inspire us and teach us things that we can then apply to our own retail space because we really want to make Aston Martin dealerships the most welcoming, the most warm, the most comfortable, and definitely the most luxurious spaces within the automotive industry. And by collaborating on real estate and on homes, It definitely gives us a new perspective and a new way of interpreting our brand that we can then directly apply back to our showrooms. And I think finally, I just want to show you guys a watch that we're doing with Gerard Perregaux. And again, just back to the whole notion of changing perspective and changing vision. That in the morning we can be sitting having a meeting about a 66-story tower. And then in the afternoon, we're talking about a watch and getting down to a fine detail and adjusting a line over less than 1/10 of a millimeter. And that by changing perspective for me is really key to sort of amplifying our productivity, key to amplifying our creativity, whether that's switching from digital modeling to physical modeling, whether that's switching from cars to helicopters, whether that's switching from something absolutely massive to something absolutely tiny. Switching perspective and trying to apply the same language, the same story, and the same brand in different ways at different times with different people is something that really, really helps us, that really drives forward all of our teams and also our cars. And I will finish with James Bond doing donuts with machine guns, because why not? He's just going to spin for like the next 5 hours. He's energetic. All right, thanks.
Thanks very much.
I just want to quickly ask you, is that working? Hello? Good working? Oh. If Ernst Stavro Blofeld came to you and asked for you to design a secret lair, what would you do? Would you say it's against brand, or would you go for it?
Oh, no, the villain layers are by far the coolest. I mean, come on, all the inspirational architecture in Bond is always the villain layers. That's for sure.
I've got one question that, there's a lot of people here I talk to who, in the architecture industry, are quite looking forward to getting rid of 2D drawings. I see the automotive and aerospace side, and I see a lot of drawings still in very highly digitized workflows. So how much does Aston use 2D drawings in its process? Because you go from sketch to one-to-one as soon as you get that clay model very quickly, and then what happens in that process of getting it to be engineered within that envelope?
Again, we keep all the tools in the toolbox, and it's the best tool for the job. So pretty much any automotive component, 3D. It's getting milled, it's getting stamped, you're making a tool, you're 3D printing it. It's sculpture, it has to be 3D. But then all of the beautiful stitch work and broguing on a seat, that's 2-dimensional. We take a flat leather hide, we cut it with a laser, we stitch it with a stitching machine, we brogue it, and then one of our craftsmen forms it through those stitch lines to create a 3-dimensional shape that we then put onto the seats. Our architecture, almost everything ends in 2D because
It's the process.
Flat surface, 90-degree angles. Your mill worker is making a 2-dimensional cut. Give him a 2-dimensional piece of information. Don't make his life hard by sending him 3D. Although having the 3D tools means that, should we want to do something more sophisticated, more complicated, we want to make a carbon fiber table, or we want to do anything like that, we have all of the molding tools, we have all of the experts. Instead of a bonnet, well, it's a chair.
Yeah.
So the best tool for the job, we designed the Formula One drivers' race suits. That's all 2-dimensional, Where's the sponsor logo going on Seb's chest, back, glove? The sponsor logo's everywhere on Seb. And that, again, 2-dimensional, it's the best tool for the job, and you connect to the process. Mill worker works in 2D, give him a 2D file. A tool maker works in 3D, give him a 3D file. At the end of the day, no one's buying CAD data. they're buying houses and cars and helicopters and watches and t-shirts. You know, what is the best for the end product? That's your answer. And if that's not what's the best for us, tough luck. You know, product first.
Could probably have one question if anyone's got one. Oop, okay. Gonna lose my ear. Where are we? I gone too far? Where were you? Oh, completely different row. So if you tell me and I'll speak out. Okay. What have you taken from the car industry that's benefited your architectural designs and vice versa, if anything?
It's endless. I mean, it's the creativity of the designers. It's, you know, the tools. It's materials, suppliers. You know, there's 100 answers in 100 different segments. Whether it's you know, taking one of our automotive suppliers and using them to do something architectural, whether it's taking one of our furniture or architectural suppliers and having them work on or consult on a seat or a finish within a car, whether it's our Maya render team, having them render the interior of an apartment or the exterior of a yacht instead of a car. Having our clay modelers sculpt a motorcycle instead of a car is something, you know, hugely beneficial. You know, most motorcycles aren't done in clay, or they're not done with the same level of firepower as you would have in an automotive studio. So I think you know, it's one of the advantages of having all the tools, whether it's, you know, the 3D CAD software, 3D printers, Maya, V-Ray. Well, I can stand here for like the next 6 hours and list render engines. There's a few of them, yeah, I think it's just having all the tools in the toolbox and having people that have been doing it for over a century. And I think it's, you know, a talented designer is a talented designer. A talented modeler is a talented modeler. You can give them a car and they'll do an excellent job. You can give them a chair, they'll do an excellent job. You can give them a dealership, they'll do an excellent job. You know, they all have the agility to, you know, switch perspective and switch from one problem to the other or one subject to the other.